The evening news announced the death sentence for the man who had once tormented my fiancée. When I saw Isabella's eyes fill with tears, I assumed she was overwhelmed by a sense of closure and justice. I had no idea that later that night, she would drive a blade into my chest while whispering in a voice thick with a terrifying, unrecognizable emotion. "This is all your fault," she hissed, "because if you hadn't chased Mark Sterling away all those years ago, I could have been the one to save him." In those final, agonizing moments as my life force drained away, the truth finally became clear. She had been harboring deep feelings for the very monster who had made her life a living hell, and my well-intentioned protection had only served as an obstacle to her twisted desires. A crushing, all-consuming sense of regret was the last thing I felt before the world faded into blackness. Then, in what felt like the very next heartbeat, I was back in that noisy high school classroom in Philadelphia, watching her get bullied all over again. This time, I chose to look away and pretend I didn't see a single thing. If she was so determined to play the role of the martyr, then I certainly wasn't going to interfere. If she wanted to sacrifice her own well-being for a hopeless cause, I figured she would be more than happy to do so. Isabella had become the primary target of Mark Sterling, the most notorious bully at Lincoln High, almost the moment she transferred in. On this particular day, she stumbled into class halfway through second period, looking like she had been dragged through a sewer. Her school clothes were soaking wet. Her skin was covered in fresh bruises, and she carried a foul, lingering stench. The moment she crossed the threshold, the other students exchanged knowing glances and wrinkled their noses in pure disgust. "Where is that god-awful smell coming from?" Someone whispered, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Did a piece of walking trash just wander in?" That's absolutely revolting. A small group of girls began to mock her openly, their voices dripping with pure malice. "You're filthy. Did you fall into a septic tank or something?" The teacher's half-hearted calls for silence were completely drowned out by waves of cruel laughter that seemed loud enough to shake the walls. Isabella's face went deathly pale as she stood there frozen, silently enduring the barrage of mockery while her eyes scanned every face in the room until her gaze finally locked onto mine. Her tear-filled eyes were pitiful, reflecting a desperate, pleading look that I remembered all too well from my previous life. She silently mouthed the words, "Please help me." Everyone in our class knew me as Davis Miller, the guy who always stood up for what was right. I had top-tier grades and came from a wealthy, influential family, a combination that usually forced bullies like Mark Sterling to back down whenever I intervened. But this time, despite her desperate and hopeful stare, I deliberately turned my head and looked away. The flicker of hope in her eyes died instantly, replaced by a wide-eyed look of utter disbelief. With no one stepping in to stop them, the insults continued to be hurled at her like stones. She trembled uncontrollably, and when Mark clapped his hands together to quiet the chaos, a brief surge of hope returned to Isabella's eyes, only to be shattered a second later. "Just yelling at her after school isn't going to be enough," he announced to his friends, "so let's take some real action this time." At that threat, Isabella's eyes rolled back in her head, and she fainted, collapsing onto the floor. My face remained a cold, emotionless mask as I gripped my pen so tightly that my knuckles turned white. A quiet, simmering anger boiled within me. Didn't she want to be the one to save this wicked bully? Why faint at the slightest bit of intimidation? What no one in that room could possibly know was that I had been reborn. In my previous life, seeing Isabella being bullied like this would have prompted me to help her without a moment's hesitation. I had chased away her tormentors and delivered a stern warning to the rest of the class. Since my family was considerably wealthier and more powerful than Mark's, he had quickly transferred to another school once he realized I was serious about stopping him. A few days later, Isabella stopped me in the hallway, her pale face filled with profound gratitude. "Thank you so much for helping me," she had said. "Without you, I think I would have faced the darkest period of my life." I had waved it off, feeling slightly embarrassed. Any decent person would stand up against bullying, I replied earnestly, "so just focus on your studies." Her eyes shone with bright admiration as she repeated her thanks. From that day on, she began to warm up to me, seeking out my company more and more often. I once asked if her studies were keeping her busy, and she blushed while avoiding my gaze. "I'm just scared of another Mark Sterling showing up," she confessed. "I only feel safe when I'm around you, so I just want to stay close." My heart softened at her vulnerability, and I accepted her closeness until, over time, we became inseparable. At lunch, she would naturally take the seat beside me, and after school, we would walk home side by side. Since she was no longer hiding in my shadow, rumors soon began to spread about our relationship. I wanted to clarify the situation, but Isabella stopped me. "There's no need, Davis," she said, taking a deep breath and struggling to find her words. "I really like you. Ever since you first helped me, I've kept you in my heart." As we grew closer, my feelings grew too. "Davis, will you let me pursue you?" Her flushed face and my own racing heart told me that the feelings were mutual. I accepted her confession, and for the next 5 years, we remained devoted partners. Even after arguments, I was always the first one to make amends. I meticulously planned gifts for every anniversary and holiday. But as time went on, Isabella began to grow distant. The sparkle in her gaze when she looked at me had vanished. When she worked late, she no longer waited up for me or even left the light on. I tried to convince myself it was just a quiet phase in our relationship, telling myself that a steady, comfortable love wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I began planning my proposal. From high school through graduation, we had never been apart, and I felt our relationship deserved a perfect new chapter. On the day of the proposal, I wore her favorite white suit and knelt before her with a ring while our friends and family applauded. Isabella seemed absent-minded, lost in her own world. After I asked, "Will you marry me?" a few times, her tearful eyes and trembling voice finally offered a yes. At the time, I thought she was simply overwhelmed with joy and engrossed in the moment. I completely ignored her strange and detached behavior. The night before we were scheduled to go to the courthouse, she appeared before me in her white wedding dress. I was on the floor, laying out a path of rose petals on the bed, believing that these personal touches were the best way to show her how much I cared. "Have some water," she offered, her hand shaking slightly. Thinking nothing of it, I drank it down and casually noted, "So, you wanted to wear the dress the night before getting hitched?" For years, Isabella had talked about wanting to wear her dress on this specific night as a way of bidding farewell to her youth before the wedding. I noticed her eyes were red, and she was shaking all over. My first instinct was to comfort her, but as I moved to stand, I suddenly collapsed to the floor, completely unable to move. "Mark is dead. Did you know that?" she asked. I struggled to recall the name through the fog clouding my brain. Yes, he was the boy who had bullied Isabella back in high school. He was dead, sentenced to execution for a brutal murder. Isabella was now crying and laughing at the same time, which was a terrifying sight to behold. Why should he have to die? It was those awful women who led him on. It's not fair. I remember the news story. Mark Sterling had brutally killed his girlfriend 6 months ago, and it had been a massive headline. When the police arrived, he was still in the middle of disposing of the body. When the details came out, the entire social media world was in an uproar, and his family could no longer protect him. Today was the day of his sentencing. "I loved him," Isabella sobbed, her voice hoarse. "I've loved him for years. Even when he bullied me, I was happy because I thought I could save him." Her eyes were bloodshot as she screamed, "It's all your fault. You protected me, and that's why he transferred schools and got led on by other girls. I could have saved him." That was when it finally hit me. Isabella had been in love with her tormentor all along. A sharp pain pierced my heart, making it impossible to breathe. I was fading fast, but I kept my eyes fixed on Isabella, my gaze filled with a burning hatred. If she loved him so much, why did she ask me to save her? Why did she confess her love to me? My overwhelming anger kept me restless even as I slipped away. The last thing I saw was Isabella's crazed smile as her white wedding dress turned crimson with my blood. Back in high school, during the time when Isabella was being relentlessly bullied, I chose a different path. Since she believed my intervention was what stopped her from saving Mark Sterling in our previous life, I decided not to intervene at all. When the final school bell rang, I simply packed my bag to go home. Mark and his friends had already planned how they were going to mess with Isabella. "Fun's over. She passed out," he laughed darkly. "Someone get some water to wake her up. Don't use the clean stuff, though. Didn't the janitor just mop the floor? Use that water instead." I ignored all of it, slinging my backpack over my shoulder and heading for the door. Just as I was leaving, Isabella woke up, drenched in filthy mop water. Her eyes were filled with confusion and fear. When she realized what was happening, she looked at me and pleaded, "Davis, you're a kind person. You're a good person. Help me. I don't want to be here. They're going to bully me to death. Please help me." I froze for a moment, and then a surge of cold anger washed over me. I wasn't going to help her. Why was she trying to drag me into her twisted game with Mark Sterling? Mark smirked at me and said, "Hey, you want to help her out? If you say so, I'll step back. She's just a girl after all." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Isabella flinch at his words, a brief flicker of hurt crossing her face. And then it clicked. Mark was the type who enjoyed stealing other guys' girlfriends, especially those of his rivals. Isabella asking me for help last time must have been a calculated move to provoke Mark into pursuing her. I slowly shook my head and rejected her plea. As I walked past, she tried to grab my ankle, but I kicked her hand away. I accidentally stomped on her fingers, watching as she winced in pain with sweat beading on her forehead. By the time I lifted my foot, her hand was already red and swollen. I turned to the class and announced clearly, "I have nothing to do with her. I'm not helping, so do whatever you want." Isabella slumped to the floor, terror filling her eyes as she realized what was coming. I shot her one last cold look before turning away. Her desperate cries faded as I walked down the hall. "Mark, please let me go. Please don't hit me. It hurts. Help. Anyone." She liked Mark, didn't she? She wanted to save him. So why was she asking for help now? I felt nothing. If she wanted to save the bad boy, she should have been happy to take the blows that came with the territory. The next day at school, I walked into the classroom just as the bell rang, which was unusual for me. Since my rebirth, I hadn't slept as well as I did last night. As soon as I entered, I immediately noticed the strange, tense atmosphere. Torn pieces of a diary were scattered all over the floor. Isabella was still in yesterday's school clothes, reeking of a nasty smell. She was covered in fresh bruises, her hair was a mess, and her face was flushed. But she stood stubbornly in front of Mark's desk, her eyes bloodshot and defiant. "Yeah, I like you, Mark. Is it wrong to love someone? Why do you say my love is worthless? You have no idea how much I care about you." My desk mate quickly pulled me down into my seat and filled me in on what had happened. It turned out that yesterday, Mark had locked Isabella in the classroom, leaving her to stew in the empty building all night as some sort of punishment. This morning, Mark had come to school early, humming a tune, but he didn't find what he expected, a dejected Isabella hiding in a corner. Instead, she was sitting peacefully at her desk, writing with a sweet smile on her face. When she saw him, she panicked and instinctively tried to hide the diary, but she was too late. Annoyed that he didn't get the reaction he wanted, Mark had stormed in, yanked her by the hair, and slammed her to the ground, giving her 2 sharp slaps across the face. That was when he saw his name written in the open diary on her desk. "I really suspect Isabella's head isn't screwed on right," my desk mate whispered, his voice full of disdain. "Is she blind or something? Falling for a lowlife who only knows how to bully his classmates. If I were her, I'd be into you instead." I frowned and cut him off. "Don't say things like that. I have nothing to do with her, and I don't want to be involved." My desk mate went quiet, feeling a little awkward. Across the room, students exchanged knowing, amused looks. Isabella was still pouring out her feelings. "Mark, you're not inherently bad. I know you're a good person deep down. You just need someone to guide you. You need redemption, and I can help you. I'll always be by your side, no matter what you're like. I like you." The room fell silent. Mark kept his head low, his bangs covering his eyes, making it impossible to tell what he was feeling. After a long moment, he finally moved, and Isabella's face lit up with joy. In the next second, he yanked her to the ground by her hair. "Who the hell do you think you are to talk about redeeming me?" A large bump formed on her pale forehead. When Mark let go, his hand was tangled with a clump of her hair, and at its root was a piece of her scalp, bright red with blood. "Are you asking for it?" he snarled. I lowered my gaze and began tidying up my finished test papers. The sickening sound of Mark hitting her echoed in my ears, punctuated by Isabella's cries for mercy. But Mark showed none. Each punch was harsher than the last. It seemed Isabella didn't need my intervention after all. She was getting more than enough attention from Mark. I allowed myself a casual smile, thinking that they were two peas in a pod, doomed to be stuck together. Isabella ended up in the hospital after Mark's assault. He had been especially ruthless that day. If the math teacher, Mr. Harrison, hadn't come in and restrained his rage, her injuries would have been far worse. Even so, she had to stay in the hospital for more than 2 weeks before she could return to school. The day she came back, I was just coming out of the faculty office with a competition form in my hand. Isabella, looking pale and limping in pain, blocked my path and bit her lip. "Why didn't you save me, Davis? Aren't you supposed to be the kindest and most compassionate person? If you'd helped me, I wouldn't have been beaten this badly. It's all your fault." Just walking that short distance had caused sweat to bead on her forehead. I frowned with annoyance. "You like Mark, don't you? Was I doing you a favor by giving you a chance to get closer to him?" I tried to walk around her, but she moved to block me again. Her lips moved, full of doubt. "This isn't how it should be. You're supposed to be kind." I raised my voice so everyone in the crowded hallway could hear. "Don't come near me, and stop pestering me to save you. You openly confessed your love to Mark. If he hits you, you must like it. You're both playing the same twisted game, so leave other people out of your mess." Around us, laughter erupted from the other students. High school life could be pretty dull, and I knew that what I said today would spread like wildfire. Now, if Isabella sought help from others, any sensible person would stay out of it. Besides, I added mockingly, "Mark hit you because you confessed to him and said you wanted to redeem him, right? It seems like he doesn't want your redemption." Isabella's face turned white, especially as she noticed the mocking gazes of her classmates. Tears welled up in her eyes. She still had some pride left, and she covered her face while trying to leave, but I stopped her one last time, speaking loudly and clearly. "I have nothing to do with you. If anything happens between you and Mark, don't expect me to help. I don't want to be involved in your so-called love that can heal. That's your belief, not something for normal people. And seriously, I really don't like you." Isabella's face flushed a deep red. She glared at me before finally storming away. After I publicly laid everything out, Isabella and Mark became the laughingstock of the school. Wherever they went, they were met with whispers and gossip. Isabella's reputation was completely ruined. Everyone knew she seemed to have a masochistic streak, and they avoided her like the plague. Some nosy classmates even started warning each other to stay away from Isabella because they didn't want to catch whatever was wrong with her. The rumors snowballed, and Mark's gaze turned more and more hostile toward Isabella. He was the infamous school bully, but now everyone was ridiculing him because of her. But Isabella seemed completely unfazed. After openly confessing to Mark, she practically became his shadow, showing up everywhere he might be. She ignored all the pointing fingers and Mark's brooding mood. With a smile, she'd say, "Mark, I like you. I'm going to pursue you. I told you you're not really bad. No one has guided you properly, but I'm here now. I can redeem you." Mark would curse under his breath, feeling utterly humiliated in front of his crew. Isabella didn't notice his disgust and kept rambling while holding out a lunchbox. "I made this breakfast myself. Try it. It's really good. You have to eat breakfast because skipping it isn't good for you." Mark finally snapped and knocked the breakfast to the ground. Instantly, all eyes in the corridor were on them. Noticing the gazes, Mark grew even more annoyed and dealt Isabella 2 sharp slaps across the face. "Come near me again, and you're finished," he scowled. Isabella sat on the ground, tears streaming down her face as her hands covered her cheeks. "Mark, I really like you," she sobbed. Mark, who had already walked away, swiftly turned back and kicked her right in the stomach. She was in so much pain that she couldn't get up from the floor for a long time. I happened to step out of the classroom just in time to witness the entire drama. Every classroom window in the hallway was open with curious onlookers peeking out. Isabella looked up and saw me, her eyes full of resentment. "Are you enjoying this? I'll catch up with Mark soon enough." I softly congratulated her. "Wow, that's great. You go and chase him then." She gritted her teeth. "I'm sure I will get him." I raised my voice slightly. Yeah. You'll definitely get him." From dating Isabella for 5 years in my last life, I knew exactly how she operated. The more you tell her she can't do something, the more determined she becomes. Everyone could see that Mark Sterling was bad news, but she saw redeeming him as some worthy, noble cause. I was sure my words had just fired her up, encouraging her to pursue Mark even more actively. I couldn't wait to see how that turned out for her. Isabella lay on the ground for a while, and not a single person helped her up. It wasn't until the bell rang that a teacher saw her bruised face and asked with shock and concern, "Were you bullied? Do you need help? I can give you a pass to the nurse's office." Isabella, clearly annoyed, struggled to her feet. "I wasn't bullied. I was just joking around with someone I like." "Stop making stuff up and mind your own business," she snapped, rolling her eyes as she stumbled back into class. The well-meaning teacher was left red-faced and speechless. The classroom went quiet as students exchanged looks. I chuckled and said to Mark, who had returned to his seat, "Congrats, man. Someone out there loves you so much. Maybe you should just go for it." My desk mate couldn't help but let out a laugh, but he quickly stopped when he sensed the tension. Mark's face turned even darker. He muttered something under his breath and skipped the next class. From that day on, students actively avoided Isabella. No one wanted to accidentally get hit when Mark was around, and no one wanted to intervene only to be accused by Isabella of being clueless. Despite it all, Isabella went all out in her pursuit. In the morning, she'd make him breakfast, speaking softly. "I woke up at 4 to make this for you. Try it. If it's good, I'll make more." During lunch, she'd follow him to skip class and cheer him on during his fights. I heard some guy from another school got annoyed with her antics and beat her up, too. The next day, Isabella came to school with a fresh set of bruises. Even then, she'd say, "Love can numb the pain. Mark is softening up to me, and I'm sure I can save him." A bunch of classmates were actually moved by her supposed devotion and started guessing when Mark would finally be redeemed by her. As soon as the bell rang, Isabella would be surrounded by people asking about her and Mark's progress. She'd strut around like a proud hen, bragging, "Mark is changing already. I'm about to succeed." She would always give me a smug look after her boasting. I'd secretly chuckle to myself. "Go ahead and laugh, I thought it won't last." The very next class, the teacher scolded Isabella harshly. "Do you even realize how much your grades have slipped? School isn't for acting out some cliché redemption story. Your focus should be on your studies." Isabella's eyes went red from the scolding. Meanwhile, the same teacher praised me. I had won a gold medal in a national competition and had already received early admission to a top-tier university. Last time, I had been too busy comforting a bullied Isabella to focus properly on studying and had only won second place. But this time, with no distractions, I put all my effort into it and finally achieved my true potential. I politely thanked the teacher for the praise. My refusal to help Isabella, coupled with my open dislike for her, had earned me a lot of social support, and many students stayed away from her as well. Her grades nosedived while I remained the teacher's favorite. Yet, soon enough, Isabella was cocky again because Mark had finally accepted her confession. I heard it happened after a big group fight. Isabella had patched him up and confessed again in a gentle voice. I don't know which one of Mark's lackeys egged him on, saying, "Boss, you should go for it. You've never dated a clingy one before. Have some fun, then break it off later." Mark had seen all of Isabella's obsessive affection, and though he still thought she was crazy, his unhappy home life had made him feel a bit touched. No girl had ever taken a hit from him and then stuck around claiming she wanted to save him. He considered it for a moment. "I'm not a good guy," he'd said. "You sure you want to be with me?" Isabella, feeling like she was the heroine of a teen drama about to save the bad boy, nodded eagerly. "Ido." And so, they started dating. Isabella was once again a big deal at school, and she even came to rub it in my face. Davis, thanks for your blessings. Mark and I are together now. I smiled and congratulated her. By the way, be sure to redeem him well. I hear real redemption means changing someone for the better. When it's done, won't you feel accomplished? Isabella rubbed her chin, deep in thought. One Friday, the sunset was a blood-red color. The upcoming weekend was a pure vacation, a rare treat for high schoolers, and everyone's spirits were lifted. But the sound of an ambulance siren suddenly interrupted the cheerful atmosphere. It stopped near the alley by the school gate, and a crowd of people gathered to see what was going on. Paramedics quickly brought out a girl on a stretcher, covered in blood, with wounds all over her body. No one could tell if she was even alive. Following the stretcher was Mark, looking gloomy, his school clothes covered in dust and bloodstains. That night, the local iMessage groups were buzzing, and I got the scoop firsthand. It turned out that when I mentioned that saving someone meant helping them rise up, Isabella had taken that to heart. She decided to start reforming Mark. When he skipped class, she'd jump in, saying, "Mark, skipping class isn't right. Let's get into a good college together." Mark, who never had any intention of being a considerate boyfriend, snapped back, "With your terrible grades, who are you to talk? My family's got money, and I'm going overseas after I graduate." Isabella's eyes had turned red. The next day, Mark planned a fight, and Isabella followed him. When the two groups were about to clash, she jumped into the middle, shouting, "Stop fighting. Come on, let's be good students instead." The other group started laughing, mocking Mark nonstop. "Oh, you want to be a good student now? Then why did you arrange this fight?" Another time, when Mark was checking out other girls, Isabella cried, "Didn't you say we'd be together forever? You're lying." That ticked him off, so the next time Isabella started preaching about saving him and helping him reach his potential, Mark finally snapped. He threw Isabella to the ground, slamming her head against the alley wall. He yelled, "Even my own parents don't tell me to do better. Who the hell are you, Isabella? I've tolerated you for long enough." In that quiet alley, the sound of the beating was endless. Isabella was beaten so badly that she was nearly dead. A classmate privately DM'd me on Instagram. "Isabella is so pitiful. Is she out of her mind, thinking she's the main character in some romance drama, trying to rescue him?" Let me ask you something, and don't get mad. But if you had helped when she first asked, would Mark still have beaten her? I replied, "Isabella is enamored by it. She likes guys like Mark. Don't overthink it or waste your sympathy on her. Save it for people who actually need it. People like her, you help them, and they end up resenting you for messing with their rescue narrative." From my past life, I had learned that lesson well. But I never expected Isabella to come looking for me again. She wore a thin white dress, her hair smooth, looking all pure and gentle, if you ignored the fact that her face was a bruised, messed-up color palette. "Davis, I regret it," she said, her voice trembling. "I realized I don't even like Mark. It was just a bad habit. I was used to chasing him and liking him, but scum like him doesn't deserve my saving. You don't know how badly I was beaten that day. I really thought he was going to beat me to death." I kept a blank face, fighting the urge to laugh. "You came back too, right?" she asked suddenly. Her eyes were red, and tears cut paths down her bruised cheeks, which was a strangely funny sight. My heart skipped a beat, but my expression remained perfectly confused. "What are you on about?" Isabella's face lit up. "You didn't come back? Great," she said slowly. "I'm your wife from the future. In the past life, you agreed to be with me around this time, and our relationship was always great. I came back to find you again, Davis. Trust me, we are meant to be. Will you help me break up with Mark? Just say you like me, and he'll leave me alone, and then we'll be together. You can tutor me again, and we'll go to the same college." As she spoke, Isabella tried to dive into my arms. I quickly backed away a few steps, questioning her slowly while reaching for my phone, my fingers rapidly typing a message. "And you say you came back from the future?" "Our future was so lovely." Isabella nodded eagerly. "Very in love. You treated me so well. You never made me sad, and you took such great care of me. When Mark was banging my head against the wall, I jumped back to now. Why didn't you save me? If you had, we would have been together sooner." She started blaming me all over again. I smirked internally. Oh, so you knew I had your back all along, huh? But in the past life, you stabbed me without a second thought. You really hate Mark now? I asked. Yeah, anyone would. I was fooled by his vulnerability. I thought he needed saving, but really he's just trash. His fate is to wallow in the mud. We should make up, I said, cutting her off, my eyes fixing on a point just behind her. Mark, you heard all that? Your girlfriend's not in her right mind, asking me to help her break up with you. Maybe it's all just a mix-up. You guys should talk it out. Behind her, Mark approached, pulling her shoulder to turn her around. Isabella shivered, breaking into a cold sweat. Suddenly, a foul smell hit the air. Isabella had wet her pants out of pure fear. Mark, her voice shook. I grinned as Mark nodded at me, then led a struggling Isabella away, ignoring her cries and insults. His expression only changed when she called him a psycho. Davis, save me. I'm your wife. In our past life, it was a great love. Her voice grew faint, her words scattered by the wind. I hummed a little tune, feeling like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was talking to myself when I said, you guys are together because I made it happen. Just now, I had sent an iMessage to Mark, and he had come over quickly enough to catch Isabella bad-mouthing him. Mark has a domineering personality, a result of his parents never being around and just sending him money. He'd probably be happy if Isabella dumped him, but if she wanted to break up by insulting him and turn to other guys for help, he might not be so willing to let go. Or rather, before breaking up, he'd want to make her suffer first. In a past life, Mark's girlfriend found out he was a jerk and tried to end things, but he killed her. Mark hates being abandoned, no matter the reason. I'll never understand why someone would want to save a jerk like that. But whatever, let the two of them be miserable together and spare everyone else. In my junior year of college, my startup took off, and I made quite a bit of money. I bought my dad a new car and my mom a new designer purse. They hugged me with tears in their eyes. That night, I went to a high school reunion in downtown Chicago. After a few drinks, the atmosphere was lively. Suddenly, I heard a couple of familiar names, Isabella and Mark. Those two twisted folks. The names sounded like they were from a lifetime ago. These past few years, I've been so focused on improving myself that I hadn't kept up with their news. Someone at the table said, I used to think the whole redemption love story between the innocent girl and the wild bad boy was thrilling. Now it just seems like one was stuck in a drama fantasy, and the other was just a pure maniac. Someone else added, Isabella and Mark didn't even take the SATs. I heard they were supposed to stay together forever. That's what Isabella wanted. But then she suddenly changed her mind and wanted out. Of course, Mark wasn't having it. He'd beat her up a little every day, and worse every third day. But he never let her break up with him. It was like he wanted to punish her to death. Then what happened? Someone asked. Then one night, Isabella snapped and stabbed Mark to death. They said the whole room was covered in blood. The table went quiet. Isabella got the death penalty. The storyteller continued, frowning. Mark's body was in such bad shape that even the cops who showed up threw up. But Isabella seemed completely crazy. She kept saying she was reborn, and that in her last life, she stabbed her fiancé to death because of Mark. And after finally being reborn, Mark wouldn't leave her alone. She's not normal. No normal person would stick around a guy like Mark. And saying she was reborn? She's even crazier. The topic quickly changed as they moved on to something new. I finished my drink slowly and went for a walk outside. The moonlight was like water, and the shadows of the trees swayed gently in the breeze. I thought to myself that I had better get back home for the hangover soup my parents always made for me. Letting go of the obsession to save others is the highest form of self-discipline for an adult. Some abysses are chosen by the person themselves. If your kindness has no boundaries, it will become the soil that buries you. Please remember that you are not responsible for the karma of others, and you certainly don't need to overextend yourself in someone else's script. True clarity is respecting the fate of others while guarding your own bottom line. May you use your limited light to illuminate those who are worthy, and even more so, to light the path of your own journey.